Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Tip Tuesday. Jeffrey Nance here with you. We are starting a new series today, kind of going along with the theme, I guess, of October, Halloween, whatever, and it's things that we fear, things that we're afraid of. So it seems appropriate today, in light of the topic, for us to understand that we have to maybe have a deeper, fuller, more adequate understanding of what the Bible really says about fear and some of the steps that people have taken, some of the things that they've done that really were risky. And I think part of it is we're going to focus today on, the fear of losing money. I really do think, though, that this comes down to just the idea of taking risk. And the most obvious application here would simply be the parable of the talents. So we'll start there, but then we'll work our way back and see several other people that took some significant risk and how God blessed that. But we can see it very, very present here in the parable of the talent. So I'm going to assume all of you guys are familiar with the parable here. Three different people are given money. It's the parable of the talents, by the way, just to throw this out there, is not about talents as far as, hey, this is something that you can do better than somebody else. A talent is an actual amount of money. It's the equivalent of 7 years worth of work. So let's just do easy math here. Okay. And we'll say that we make $50,000 a year. So one talent would be 7 years worth. So seven times 50,000, $350,000 in today's money. Now, if you could say, well, what's 100,000, then it could be as much as 700,000. So somewhere between 350,000 and 700,000 is one talent of money. So when we hear that one person was given 5 talents, another one was given 2, and another one was given 1, guys, it doesn't matter how you slice it. They were given large sums of money. So I'll let you kind of extrapolate the math there a little bit and figure out how much they were given. But these people were given large sums of money. I mean, even the guy, kind of on the lower scale with 1 talent would have been given maybe as much as 350,000 in today's uh, finances. So that's a pretty good chunk of money. Now we know from the story then that two of them, the one that was given 5 and the one that was given 2, they both went out and they doubled their money. And when they come back after the master returns, he says to them, "Well done, my good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I'll put you in charge of more." Faithful with a few things. I mean, I don't know, guys. What do you guys think? You're dealing with over $1 million. Does that seem like a few things, like a few pennies, like something you picked up on the side of the road? or does it or does it seem like maybe this is a pretty good step up, and what's interesting, particularly when we talk about losing money and the fear of losing money, it's one thing to lose $20, $10, $5, maybe in 100. And we can start to kind of say, well, what's a number where I'd be like, oh man, that was rough. Yeah, 1,000, 10,000, 20,000. Yeah. So you can start to put a number where you would go, wow, that would be really uncool. But imagine what it would take if you are these people that you're given this sum of money and you're told by your boss, hey, go and do well with what I've given you. And essentially, then we have the other steward here, who goes and he buries that money. And when he returns, here's what the master says to him: "You wicked and lazy servant, why didn't you at least put my money, he says, give it to the exchangers, which essentially means, why didn't you put it in a savings account where I could have at least made some interest on it? Now, I I hope their interest rates are better than ours, because with some amount of money he had, you'd make like $2 off of it. It's crazy. It's crazy how little you're making in a savings account right now. But Jesus basically says to him, that would have been better than what you did. But he was so afraid that he was going to lose money that he just went and buried it. So in essence, due to inflation, he did lose money, but he brought back the same amount. But he didn't make anything. Why? Why did he not make anything? Because he was afraid of losing something. Guys, there is one sure way to not lose any money trading in the stock market. One sure way to do that. That is this. Don't trade. Don't trade. Don't put any of your money in the stock market. That's one sure way to not lose any money in the market. Because if you decide to trade, like the guy who had 5 talents and the guy who had 2 talents, there is a possibility, and I would go so far as to increase that to probability, that you are going to lose money. And that you would learn then to be okay with that, because we could be like the parable says, the lazy servant, right? He calls him wicked and lazy. Guys, listen, wicked and lazy. Why was he wicked and lazy? Because he did nothing with the money. Why did he do nothing with the money? Because the Bible says he was afraid. He was afraid. So he did nothing with the money that he was given. Why? Because he was afraid he might do what? He was afraid he might lose it. And Jesus looks at this guy and he doesn't say, hey, good job, way to be conservative. No, he looks at him and says, you wicked and lazy servant. What does he say to the other people who were willing to take risk? They could have lost money. They doubled their money instead, but that doesn't mean that they didn't have expenses. Every business has expenses. Every business loses money on something, whether it's cost of goods, paying employees, electricity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's not about losing money, right? None of us wants to lose money. So let me ask you guys this. What's the difference between an expense and a loss? Because we call them losses. And it really does set up a certain mentality when you lose. It's like, somebody else won. I lost. An expense, though, is what we really ought to be thinking about. Not so much about whether we're losing money, but whether or not we have expenses. What's the difference? Or at least as I define it. Every business has expenses. There are things that are going to cost you money. But do you learn from it and do you benefit from that? So if I own a business and I pay employees, I'm losing money by paying those employees. But am I benefiting by having those employees? If I am, then those are expenses. I don't look at that and go, that's a loss every month. If I didn't have Geoffrey on the payroll, I'd be way better off. Well, if that's the case, then they need to get somebody else so that they can benefit from that. So when you are trading in the market, you are going to have expenses, all right? But losses, that's where you just get nothing out of it. You just simply lose money. You don't learn anything from it. You don't benefit from it. You just simply lose money. We don't want you to have losses. Expenses, yes, you'll have those. Losses, we'd like for you to avoid those. Why? Because a loss means I just have less money and I'm no better off. I didn't benefit from it. I didn't get anything out of it. My company's not any better. I, as a trader, am not any better. That's just a loss. So from that perspective, yes, we ought to be concerned that we don't lose, right? But we have to differentiate between having a loss and having expenses. And for every trader, they are concerned about losing money. But I want to fashion this discussion a little bit differently here too. Well, we started out with a parable of talents, and what we've seen is that those people took risk. Somewhere along the line, Christians have come to this conclusion, which is absolutely ludicrous, by the way, that we're not supposed to be risk takers. I would encourage you guys to just open up your Bible and just start working your way through that and realizing how much risk God's people have taken throughout history. We have been some of the biggest risk takers in history. And now we are raising up this generation of people that's like, I want to be satisfied. I don't want to take risk. I just want to sit here. I want to be okay with where I am. And I don't want to take risk. And yet we look at things that people accomplish. Think about Abraham. He's living in this land. He's there with his family. And God says to him, look, Abraham, or Abram at that time, look, Abram, I want you to get up. I want you to leave your people and go to a place you know nothing about. And Abram's like, all right, God, I trust you. I'm going. So he picks up his wife, he picks up his nephew that he's taken care of, and they set off. And what does God do? He blesses him. Was that taking a risk, leaving your whole family? Yes, that was not something that people did back then. Abram did it. All right. We think about the people of Israel. God says to them, I'm going to give you this land. I promised this land to Abram. Now I want you to go into that land. And they send 12 spies into the land. And they come back and say, this land is amazing. But what? There's giants. And they become afraid of the giants. And here's what happens, guys. Their fear of failure becomes greater than their desire for success. I'm going to repeat that. Their fear of failure became greater than their desire for success. And as a result of that, because they weren't willing to take risks, God said, fine, you can go hang out in the desert till a generation of you dies. That generation dies off, and then God says, all right, Joshua, Caleb, let's do this. Guys, listen, the giants didn't disappear. Okay? The risk of failure was still there. There's still giants in the land. But Joshua and Caleb didn't let the giants keep them from entering the promised land. They were willing to take that risk. But if you open up the book of Joshua, what you're going to find over and over and over again in the first several chapters of that, and also throughout that book of the Bible, is the words, do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. I am with you. Guys, listen. We talk about Peter, right? And we remember Peter's failures. When we think about Peter, we talk about Peter getting out of the boat. There were 12 apostles sitting in that boat. Only one of them walked on water. Only one of them. The one who was willing to take a risk. And we say, yeah, but Peter fell. He fell. He fell in the water. There were storms out there, Geoffrey, and he fell in the water. But yes, why did he fall? Because he got afraid. He became afraid. He looked around at the storm around him. He took his eyes off of Jesus. He forgot about God's promise. He became afraid. He started to look at all the dangers and said, all right, let's go back. I want to get back in the boat. So he took a risk, but then he saw, you know what? Now I'm afraid. Guys, listen, if you were a trader and you've made that step, it doesn't mean just because you've made a step that you're not going to be afraid. It doesn't mean that you're not going to lose money. In fact, you probably will. What I want you guys to do is keep your eyes on the prize. Yes, in a bigger context, Peter keeping his eyes on Jesus is much greater than us having financial goals and meeting them. I absolutely understand that. It's much more important, right? Your spiritual life. But I do believe the Bible talks a lot about money. In fact, it talks more about money than it does heaven and hell. That's kind of weird, right? Jesus spent more time talking about money than heaven and hell. Why? Because it's an important thing to us. And because it's important to us, it's important to Jesus. So he talks to us about how to approach it. We want to hang on to our money. We want to see our money grow. Many of us have desires to take this money that we have and use it for good. And that is incredible. But nothing has changed, guys, in God's route for this to happen. So, like, we'll go full circle here and realize in the parable of the talents, they had money. But in order to double that money, they had to take risk. You're not going to double your money putting that stuff in savings. So you say, I want to bless people. I want to bless the Lord. Well, then you have to ask yourself, well, how can I do that with the knowledge and skill sets that I have? How can I increase my knowledge and skill sets? And how can I be available, understanding I'm going to have to take a risk? I will probably have some expenses, but I'm willing to do that because my desire for success is greater than my fear of failure. And I want that to be true for all of us in multiple areas of your life. If there's something that you just haven't started, but you've thought about it, but you're just afraid maybe you can't do it or that you won't be good at it, well, let this be a word of encouragement to you. Get out there and try. Don't let your fear of failure be greater than your desire for success. And that's true in many, if not every area of our life. Jesus tells us over and over, do not be afraid, for I am with you. Let's go out there, guys. Take the risk. We may have some expenses along the way, but the Lord is with us. There were people when they fought battles that died. Sometimes we forget that. They went out there, they died, they fought, they died. But the people endured, right? So we have to be willing to take risks. Yes, there will be expenses, but we need to keep persevering, keep moving forward, and having a willingness to take the necessary and appropriate risk given our knowledge and our abilities. And to say, Lord, please bless what I'm trying to do for you and for your glory. Let me be like one of those servants who went out there and had great success because of the blessing that you put on them. Guys, that's our tip for today. Do not be afraid, for I am with you. And it applies to so many areas of our life. Trading, yes. Work, family, new opportunities, new ventures, you name it. Do not be afraid. The Lord is with us. Do not let your fear of failure be greater than your desire for success. And that's our tip for today. Thanks for being with us.